Hi kittens, I'm Julie Savone, psychedelic facilitator, integration expert, and your guide for this wild ride, the Inner Trip, 365 days with plant medicine. I've helped hundreds of people use plant medicine, primarily psilocybin, to heal, expand, and step into their next level. But this year, I'm taking it even deeper. For the next 365 days, I'm bringing you with me. I'll be microdosing, journeying, integrating, and exploring what it really means to live a limitless life, with plant medicine as a tool, not a crutch. So if you're ready to feel more alive, more clear, more limitless, and you're down to do it with mushrooms and a little bit of sass, you're in the right place. Let's take the inner trip. Hello, kittens! I'm Julie Savone, your host on 365 Days with Plant Medicine. Welcome to the Inner Trip. Today, my intention for this podcast is to share my journey with plant medicine with you. So how it looked at the very beginning versus how it looks now, and also to set the context for where we're going to jump into this 365-day experiment. And I don't want to bury the lead, but we are taking the biggest cannonball possible for our first foray into plant medicine together on this journey. So excited to share more about that at the end as well. If you had looked at my life 6 years ago, you would have seen a perfectionist, a high performer, a chameleon, a party girl, and an attorney. I have my Juris Doctor right here. You know, I put it up there because I did it, I earned it, I practiced for 3 years, but ultimately wasn't something that I was ever super jazzed about, super passionate about, and was something that I had sort of fallen into, although you might say, like, how could you fall into being an attorney? There is so much work that goes into it. But it was simply a way to give other people what I thought they wanted from me. So I think we really get to take it back to when I was 6 years old and my dad died. My dad died when I was very young. And it is probably understandably the hardest thing that I've ever gone through. My dad was the parent where I felt most connected to, I felt most unconditionally loved by. And my mom was also raising a child with autism. So my little brother's on the spectrum, and he was nonverbal for a long time. That's obviously a lot of work. And you know, I felt, spent more time and energy with him, which is also understandable, right, as an adult and looking at it now. But in the moment, it was really hard. And this person who I loved so much and who I felt so loved by just disappeared. And I had no control over that. And so as a means to control, I started to become the epitome of the good little girl. And I also felt like I got more praise when I was accomplishing, when I was producing, when I was behaving. And that was my strategy for survival. That was what I did in order to be accepted and cared for. And ultimately, that is the most innate human survival instinct, is to be accepted by the tribe, right? Humans are not isolated creatures. Our need for acceptance by the pack runs super deep, and that is what I found I needed to do to be accepted. I also remember, as a little 5th grader, signing that DARE pledge, raising my hand, saying I would not do drugs. Nancy and Ronald Reagan got me good. And I also really believe the government propaganda that we are led to believe around psychedelics, right? There's that story that is not true. It was a plant in the news about a guy in the 60s or 70s who dropped acid and then hopped off a building. Never happened. But all of this stuff around psychedelics and that it would scramble your brain really freaked me out, and I was not here for it. And so even though I drank in high school, even though I smoked pot in high school, I definitely was not about psychedelics. My first psychedelic experience was on St. Patrick's Day. I had been drinking, which is something that I really don't recommend. And I took acid. A friend gave me acid, and I thought it was just an amazing time. I felt everything was alive. I felt so connected. I had so much love in my heart. I at one time imagined that I was Snow White, and all of my animals, I had 2 cats and a dog at the time. I still have 2 cats and a dog, but this is a new dog. The other one had passed, and I was imagining I was Snow White, and animals were just convening on me, and I called my mom and told her how much I loved her. I also told her that I was on acid, which was not the right choice at the time. When we get into talking about my retreats, I will say to everyone, like, no phones for this experience. I know you want to tell your mom you love her, but that can wait. And it was just really eye-opening. It showed me how misconceived I had been around psychedelic use. And it just opened my eyes. But I will say at no point, at that point, At no point, even 5 years ago, did I think that I was going to create a business around psychedelics, that I was going to help people do this work in a sustainable, intentional, transformational way. I never thought I would create a six-figure business and beyond. It was never my aim. It was something that I felt was just like an undeniable path that was being placed in front of me that I was meant to walk on. So if you would have looked at my life 6 years ago, you would have seen a high achiever, you would have seen a party girl, you would have seen a social chameleon, you would have seen someone deeply insecure and overwhelmed, and you would have seen an attorney. You know, I went so far as to start practicing law, and I did practice for 3 years. I was always pretty unhappy in the law. I suffered from some really intense anxiety and depression, and my flavor was rumination and what I like to call apocalyptic thinking. So I could not let shit go. The thoughts would just keep swirling there. I could not put them down, no matter what I did, to avoid, to numb, to tune out. And I also took everything to a nuclear conclusion. So, you know, your boss gives you some feedback on a case. Oh, I'm getting fired. Your boyfriend's tone feels off. Oh, he's breaking up with me. Everything was the worst possible outcome at all times, and that is really not a fun way to live. That's not a fun brain to be in. And I can remember sobbing on the couch in my house in Illinois when I was still practicing as an attorney, just thinking like, this is a death sentence essentially. I wasn't contemplating ending my own life, but I was thinking like I was going to live with some level of anxiety and depression all the time, no matter what, because I'd gone to therapy, and therapy felt really re-traumatizing. It was like, I get it. My mom messed me up. She is the reason I am the way I am. My dad died. Like, that's terrible. But it was never, every week was ripping off the scab, and it was never moving forward. It was never like, okay, that may be true, and what are we going to do with it? I also had been prescribed Prozac, which did help in the sense of like the intensity of my feeling wasn't there, but no intensity was there of any feeling. I felt like a zombie. I felt numbed out. I gained weight. I had no interest in sex. And life just felt really gray. It wasn't so low, but it was never high. It was just very blah. It was very zombie land. So that was really why I was crying. I was thinking like, okay, I'm on this Prozac and it's better, but it's still not like completely gone, and I don't want to live like this forever. And I felt very doomed by those thoughts. Like, this is just the way it was. And then I found coaching. I remember hiring my first coach, and she asked me as we started working together, like, what's important to you? How do you want your life to look? What do you value? And these were questions I had never asked myself. I had absolutely never asked myself these questions. And when I really sat to think about it, I realized how misaligned my life was with what I said I valued. And honestly, part of that value assessment was experimentation, because I had never stopped to think about it. So I didn't really know. I didn't know what it would feel like to have more peace. I didn't know what it would feel like to have more intentional time. And so I was experimenting with all of these new questions that she was asking me in her coaching relationship. And I was really more focused on shifting the future and that change, because to me, therapy is more focused on the past and rehashing the past, and coaching is more forward focused. And it started to feel good, but it also started to feel like I am really not living the life that I want to live. And so what am I going to do about that? And at first I tried to just change my practice area and think like, okay, maybe if I'm doing a different kind of law, I feel better. Lots of trial and error there. Didn't end up working. And so one day during the pandemic, I heard this woman on a podcast who I'd been listening to for years, and she said, do you want to get certified a coach? And it was just an immediate intuitive yes. I was like, yes, I do. So I still had one foot in, one foot out with the law, but I said yes to signing up for her coaching certification. This had also been over a year's time, and I had done acid that one time and never come back to it. And shortly after signing up for the coaching certification, I was living in California at the time. I decided that I wanted to take acid again and to have it be creative time with my business. It was Lionsgate, and I was at the beach. I live super close to the beach. And what I thought was going to be time spent thinking about my business and like a program and, content became this huge download and breakthrough around my family, around my relationship to my mom, to my uncle, and to my grandparents. And my namesake is a baby that my grandma lost. Really like late term pregnancy loss. And they were going to name her Julie. She was 6 months pregnant, already knew it was a girl. The baby died. And it was soul crushing, as I'm sure anyone who's experienced the loss of a child can imagine. And so that was the baby that was meant to come through then. And I had this realization that soul, because I am of the belief that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, that soul was not meant to come out then at that time, but that soul was meant to come out now in this moment in time, because the world wasn't ready yet for this mission. The world wasn't yet ready yet for what I was meant to do. And at that time, I had no idea, again, that where my life would take me was to plant medicine as a facilitator. And I include LSD within the plant medicine family. And I know some people get really like hot and bothered about that, but ultimately it is derived from a fungus, ergot, because it's derived from a natural substance, a fungus among us. I'm including it in plant medicine, but you can find me in the comments. I don't care. I welcome it. And I had this just really profound, like everything made sense, right? My relationship with my mom is a little bit more contentious. It's a little more sisterly. My uncle really bothers me. Sometimes it feels more like a brother-sister relationship. I was extremely close to my grandparents. They always called me their number one grandchild. I know that that's like not healthy. Whatever, fight me in the comments. But they felt more like my actual parents, or like another set of parents, And it was just this mind-blowing, like puzzle pieces clicking, like that scene in The Hangover when all the math, that's originally from what? Rain Man, everything. The math is mathing. And so although I didn't get what I wanted from that experience, I got what I needed from it, which is what I tell people all the time. You are always getting exactly what you need, even if it's not exactly what you want. And that counts for journeys big and small. So from there, I was working on my business. I still had one foot in, one foot out in the legal realm. And someone had asked me to run a nonprofit that they had founded in LA. I was living in San Diego. And that felt good. Yeah, I'm sure. I'll run this nonprofit. I love making an impact. That's ultimately why I wanted to be a lawyer, was to make an impact. We can go on a whole other tangent there about how it takes a long time and the legal system is broken and neither party is ever going to feel 100% good about the situation. But I was running this nonprofit, and she asked if I wanted to sit in an ayahuasca ceremony. She was in a dieta period, I believe, at that time, to facilitate ayahuasca. And we'll talk about what a dieta means in a later episode. And she asked if I wanted to sit. And it felt, again, very intuitive, very much like a yes. So I did the prep. I guess we can talk about what a dieta is now. A dieta is a diet that you follow ahead of plant medicine, but it's specifically ayahuasca use, but it's not just about what you eat. It's about what you're consuming, how you're spending your time. So I followed the plan, and I got ready to sit, and I wasn't intending to say this on the podcast first episode, but you know what? Here we go. Right before I was going to sit, I found out that I was pregnant, and it was with someone that I did not want to pursue a relationship with. And I learned a lot about, safe sex in general, choosing a partner, opening yourself up energetically to certain people and when that's a good idea, when it's not. So a lot of lessons learned there, but I found out that I was pregnant, and I called my facilitator and I said, like, hey, this is the situation. I just found out I'm like maybe a week pregnant, but I still really want to sit. What should I do? And so she shared with me, women in the Amazon, where the tribe is from, that she is a part of, that, she facilitates in their style, that those women sit in ceremony up to 7 months pregnant. After that, there's a risk of contraction and early, pregnancy or early birth. And that's not a good idea. But if I wanted to sit, it would be okay for the baby, and that I wouldn't do anything. And at this point, I was, again, every intention is about my business. It's never about the other things that come up. But my intention in that ceremony was to get clarity on my business. And through sitting with ayahuasca, I made really beautiful connections with my dad. I felt his presence so purely. And it was such a relief. Same with a dog that I had that had just passed. Felt her presence. I also felt like the immensity of the power of love as almost like a shield, not to protect me, but rather like this like armor that I wear, not as protection, but as like a beacon in the world. And just like how, if we felt the capacity, like the full capacity of love every day, it would be so overwhelming. And so I felt this love, and I ended up talking to the baby, and the baby was a boy, and it had this like robotic voice. And I was also talking to ayahuasca, and in the conversation with her and the baby, and in my mind was God, what the baby and ayahuasca shared with me is that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. That if I chose to end the pregnancy, that the soul would come out, the energy would come out in another way, in another form. And that if I chose to do that, then my story would end up being the exact thing that so many women needed to hear, because she told me to never feel shame or guilt about my choice. And ultimately, that is what I decided to do. For so many reasons, the partner, so many things about not wanting to have children and it not being the right time, and this partner. And so I shared this in the share circle, and after share circle of that ceremony, 3 women came up to me in that room of 15 women alone and said, I had an abortion. I have felt bad about it for 5, 10, 15 years. It has eaten me alive. Thank you so much for sharing the story with me. And so as I've continued to share about it on social media, I've shared about it with different clients who have brought up experiences. There's been so much relief from me sharing the story, me sharing my experience with plant medicine and ayahuasca. And I know that that is a huge reason for me doing this work, because I saw what was possible through sharing that insight. And it's also why at the core of my work, it has always been true. It's that shame and guilt are not welcome here. They don't serve you. They're not useful. They're holding us back from creating real change. All these cultures, I mean, I grew up Catholic. All these cultures that are trying to shame you and to guilt you into other behavior, it's not effective. It's very well proven in sociological studies. We get to let that shit go. And so many of my clients say the biggest thing they got from working together with me is saying, like, they no longer guilt trip themselves. They no longer shame themselves for their choices or their actions, and they just come to it from a completely different space. So that makes me so incredibly happy. But even after that experience, I still wasn't thinking like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. However, a contact that we had in Colombia, we worked with people in Colombia in my nonprofit. He came to the United States. He is an expat, and he was visiting. We went out to dinner, and he said, hey, I'm investing in this company. Do you want to come? I would love to get your input, hear what you think. Sure, why not? Turns out he was investing in a microdosing company. He gave me this microdosing capsules. He was like, take these and see what you think. And in all of my experiences, I guess, my recreational LSD use wasn't like facilitated per se, but I didn't know what you were supposed to do with microdosing. Like, what does that mean? So I bought a copy of How to Change Your Mind. I read it. I have a background in science, so I was reading all these research studies. I even went so far as to pursue psychedelic facilitation because there just wasn't a lot of like good information on how to microdose. And so I realized through the research that I could actually get to the root cause of my depression and anxiety by combining microdosing with what the research calls intentional relearning tools. So for some people, it's like their brains just aren't primed for change. They have really rigid brains. People with anxiety, depression, OCD, PTSD, addiction have very rigid brains, meaning the grooves are well established, the neural connections are well worn, well patterned. It's like when you try to ski down a mountain and 1,000 other people have gone before you, it's hard to make your own path. Like, you're most likely going to default into a path that's already made. Same for those kinds of brains. So it's not that you're not doing good work, everyone out there listening who's still suffering from anxiety, depression, PTSD, addiction, OCD, but it's that your brain is not really a fertile ground for change. And microdosing can be just the thing that shakes the snow globe, gives you a fresh layer of snow, not my analogy, this is Paul Stamets, and allows you to make new connections, to go down a different pathway in your brain for the work that you're doing, the good work in therapy and coaching, all of that stuff to actually work, to actually stick. So I shook the snow globe and I healed the root cause of my anxiety, depression. And because I was already coaching and I was online sharing about my life. I talked about microdosing. I talked about my journey with ayahuasca, right? Why would I talk about microdosing? And people are like, I want this. Teach me how to do this. Can you lead me through this? And I was like, what? This is not my intention at all. I was doing executive coaching at the time. But the universe will speak to you if you're open to listening to it. And after so many requests, I decided, like, okay, let's do it. Let's go for this. And so that was 4 years ago that I started facilitating for other people. And since then, it has truly become my life's work and mission. And when I first started, this work for myself, it really was about the anxiety and the depression and just getting out of that crunchiness, that overwhelm, that like desperation, just like how shitty of a place my mind was to be. And then it moved into using microdosing as a tool to reprogram my mindset around business, because those of you listening who are entrepreneurs, you're going to know this. It is really a mental game when it comes to like taking action in your business and going for it. And you are your own biggest obstacle. So I was really focusing on like, okay, how can I get out of my own way? How can I drop these patterns of self-sabotage? How can I focus on being the person who gets stuff done, who does stuff scared, who shows up anyway, of just feeling very resilient in my business. And so that was my focus for a long time too. And so all this time I was helping people get to the root cause of their anxiety and depression. I was helping people feel better. I was helping people become the kind of moms they wanted to be. I started facilitating larger journeys after taking a course in trip sitting, because people were like, take me through, take me through a hero's dose, take me through, an actual mushroom ceremony, a trip, a journey. So I did that before I felt ready, but I did it scared. I showed up anyway, and I'm about to be hosting my 9th retreat. And so it was a combination of this microdosing with a clear intention and a protocol, going on larger journeys. I mean, in there as well, like I sat with ayahuasca more times. I had some more LSD experiences. LSD has not been something that I've used a lot in my business, not because I don't love it. It really is my favorite family member in the plant medicine family. But it has been hard in the past to find a good source. Now that I have one, it's something that I'm introducing more in my highest level containers, because I like to say mushrooms are medicine for the heart and LSD is medicine for the brain. And unless you have done the heart work and integrated that healing, you're going to be doing some like neural work on a really shaky foundation. Really not a good place to be. And that's where you see these really ungrounded, like almost like technocrats, right? They're so smart and they clearly are using plant medicine to expand their problem solving capacity, but it's also just like scary and narcissistic. And so that's why I'm a mushrooms first, LSD second kind of girl. I've done group programs, I've done one-to-one, I've done DIY options, I have a text program. So like there have been so many different evolutions of this work and how I've served people. But as I've been looking at my journals over the past several years, because I ran a group program for 18 months that I closed a year ago, and I realized I only opened that program because someone told me like that was the way to scale. They're like, you just need a group program. Go create a group program. I was like, oh, okay, sure. Like I wasn't fully in my seat of power of like guiding myself in business. And because it was something that I was told to do versus something that I wanted to do, the energy was off, I felt like. It was never fully the conversations I wanted to be having and what I wanted to be doing. And so I felt the call to make another group program, but I wanted it to be exactly the thing that was going to service the conversations that I am currently having and I want to be having. And so I was looking at the evolution of my work, and I realized like at the beginning, I was just praying for relief. I just wanted to feel better. And now, in my last retreat, because I do the integration with the ladies, and I actually could get it out right here, but instead of thinking about like I want anxiety relief or I want to not be sad anymore, I want to stop sabotaging myself, I started asking myself questions like, what would it be like to live truly in the land of infinite possibility? And if there were no guardrails on life, what big dreams would I come up with? And how can I hold even more of the good, the joy, the abundance, the prosperity? What would it look like to increase my capacity around those things? To like be a receiver, a container for those things at an even greater level. So the questions that I have been asking myself, the things that I have been working on are completely different. Right? Where in the beginning I was just surviving, right now I am thriving. I'm really thinking about that movie with Bradley Cooper, Limitless, where he takes this drug that I think was a commentary on Adderall. And, you know, it helps him for a little bit, but then it like slowly starts to eat in him and it ends up destroying him. Or I actually don't remember. I don't think I watched the ending, but you know, we see all these studies now about like Adderall-induced psychosis and how dangerous it is to be on prolonged amphetamines. And, you know, that's been something that a lot of people have come to me for years, is to help them safely and sustainably titrate off of unwanted medications like Adderall, Vyvanse, Prozac, Lexapro, Wellbutrin. Something that I've done for myself and I've helped dozens of other people do. But instead of thinking about Adderall as a limitless drug, using microdosing as a tool to become limitless, right? Increasing our capacity, like reprogramming our brains, not for survival, but for expansion. Because right now your brain is just primed for survival. Ultimately, all your brain wants is to keep you safe and to keep you alive into the next day. But like keeping you alive is not the same as like helping you actualize your potential, helping you put your head on the pillow every single night thinking like, wow, I gave this day my 100%. I'm so proud of myself and everything I put forth. It's not helping you live in your zone of excellence right now, but we can use microdosing as a tool to reprogram your brain to exist in your zone of excellence always. So that's what I'm interested in now. That's why I created my new community, Living Limitless, because these are the things that I want to be doing. These are the conversations I want to be having. And of course, people need help with their anxiety and depression, and they want to get off medications, and there are lots of resources for that as well that I'm happy to share with you. But this is my focus right now, and actually in the show notes, if you want to check out Living Limitless, you can go see it there. You can also go take a quiz to determine whether or not microdosing is the right next step for you. But that's where I've been in plant medicine. This is where I'm going, and as we get started in this work together, I'm jumping really big into my year of plant medicine use, intentional use with integration, with all that good stuff. So for my first foray, I am going to be taking myself through a 2-day sequence of a large mushroom journey. So I consider that anything over 2 grams, like a full mushroom ceremony, and then a full dose of acid or more, because that is my new formula at my international retreats. I have retreats coming up in Costa Rica and Mexico, one over New Year's and one in May. And on my international retreats, instead of just doing 1 day of psilocybin, we're going to do 1 day of psilocybin followed by 1 day of LSD. So I'm testing out that formula because obviously I'm the guinea pig and I get to go first and make sure that it's going to be amazing and beautiful and transformational, and I'm sure it will be. But that is what I'm going to do for my next, or my first step of doing plant medicine for a year. And so once I know the exact dosages I'll take you through the formula of like, okay, how am I going to calculate my rest period? I'm going to take you through my full integration and everything that comes up on the journey. So in the next episode, I'll get into kind of the formula around how do you plan your on days and your off days. I'll do the math with you essentially, right? I'll take you through the recipe of how I'm figuring out how much plant medicine I can take without building up my tolerance, but still have all the positive effects and do it in a really like integrative way. I'll take you through that kind of like recipe and plan. And then the next episode we'll be sharing about the journeys that I've been on. But, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you making this a space where I felt like I could talk about some things that, even though I had talked about them openly in the past, it doesn't always mean that it's fun or easy for me to talk about. So I'm really grateful that you're here, that you're on this journey. And if you're still listening, I assume you're listening from an open, loving, non-judgmental space. So I appreciate that as well. And for your integration today, I would love for you to think about the past 5 years, because we don't do this very often, and really think like, how far have you come? Right? Give yourself a pat on the back. What is different about your life now? What is it about your life now that is really a dream that you had on your heart that you've now created in the last 5 years? So just take some time, whether you want to journal it. DM me on Instagram. I would love to connect with you on Instagram. Tag me on Instagram, share it with me, voice note it to yourself, but just take some time to really acknowledge yourself and celebrate yourself for all that you have caused and created in your life thus far over the last 5 years. So sending you so much love. Excited to get into the specifics of how we're planning out this year. Sending you lots of love. We'll talk soon. That's the end of today's trip. But remember, the real magic has always been inside of you. If this episode landed, send it to a friend who's ready to step into their next level. And make sure you're following the show so you never miss a dose. I'll be back again soon with another day on the path to your most limitless life. And until then, trust yourself, follow your intuition, and keep asking, how good can it get?